Yeah, it took me like 3 years to build a following on YouTube. I'm lucky I have like, oh, hold on. Let me see here. Okay, we're recording. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Typical Skeptic podcast. Today's episode is going to be really fun. Just a couple housekeeping notes. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe. Leave a tip if you feel obliged. I always have links in the description. Um, Everybody's been, like you can join the Patreon. People seem to love the content that I'm putting in the Patreon. You can join the Discord. The Discord's free. That's more for like experiencers to come in and talk about their experiences and what happens is a lot of times after a live stream, people will come into the Discord and continue the conversation. So there's all that stuff, and then all the links will be in the description. That's all I have about me. About my guest today, I have I'm talking amazing guest today. I heard him on another show, and I was like, man, I got to get him on my show because he's just had some amazing experiences. I'm talking from astral travel to near-death experiences. He does Reiki. He's had paranormal experiences, saw shadow people, does tarot, gypsy card or gypsy palm readings. He does something called timeline therapy. I got to ask him about that. He does Huna. He's just like very immersed in the paranormal, and I really respect that. Like because I love this. It's like one of my favorite areas to study. And who I'm talking about is Michael Kopf, Koph. Yeah, no, Kopf. Sorry, Michael. And he's the host of My Paranormal Journey and Paranormal Verses. And I'll put links for his shows in the description. And with all that said, I want to give him a big warm welcome to the show. Michael, thank you for coming on. How are you?
I'm doing good. And just a little housekeeping is the paranormal shows that I host is the energy that surrounds us, and I co-host Paranormal Verses. My YouTube channel is basically my paranormal journey, so that's why I have 3 YouTube channels. So just wanted to clarify, so if people went looking for the show, they weren't looking at it going, wait, he said it was called My Paranormal Journey, because they won't find that. So just wanted to make that clear.
No, that's cool. I guess that's good to always have backups in case anything would ever happen. I mean, I don't know if you get really conspiratorial, but sometimes they like to take stuff away. Like, you know what I mean? Like they try to take people's channels down and stuff like that. So,
They
I
do,
mean,
and it's the strangest thing is like I've used a countdown that I've switched from using because it was built into StreamYard. And I would get dinged for copyright, and then they'd say, well, the person's let it go. I'm like, well, you're the ones that provided this, so why am I getting dinged for something that's built into a system? And so I had a co-host create a intro, and a friend of ours created the intro for the other show, so we have put an end to the copyright issues.
that's good. That's really good. Yeah, that they'll always get you for that. I've always wanted to like play music on my podcast, especially like when I do like an audience call-in show. I'd like to make it more like radio format, and I do that. But I mean, I'd like to buy like music rights someday and be able to play music. So like I can make it like fully like a radio show. That's kind of like my dream in the future. I always wanted to be like Art Bell. I don't know if you followed, like stuff for a while, but like I was a big Art Bell fan when I was a kid. And, I just love listening to the radio and listening to the paranormal radio. And like, it's just, and I love radio too, like, were you ever into radio or like, what kind of got you interested? I mean, like you've had paranormal experiences. Is that kind of what got you into all this?
Well, I kind of grew up in the paranormal, and so how the story goes is I grew up with it and just was like, okay, whatever, it's normal every day for me. I didn't really, know about the TV shows. And then when I started watching the TV shows, I was like, huh. So people do investigate this, but these are people who are on TV, so obviously they, select groups, so it's not really anything anybody really does. It's, probably an ad agency asked, how you normally think about TV shows, casting. And then I got approached by a paranormal team, and my first comment to them was, wait, this is real? People actually do this? And they were like, yeah. And so I got hooked.
And you've investigated. So you're that's another thing. You're an actual paranormal investigator. Like you go out to places and you've investigated a lot of different places, right? Like you've
I have.
where all of you went, and do you kind of go all over the country, or like what are some of your like top places that you've investigated?
Well, so far I have been to, I believe, 7 states investigating, kind of around the South. I'm based out of Texas, and so my favorite places to go is Fort Walters Military Base in Mineral Wells. It's a partially decommissioned military base, and the other part of it, the Army National Guard uses. So we get to investigate a couple buildings there that are. I mean, every time I've gone there, I've had different kind of paranormal activities. So it's one of those fun places that it's like, as investigators, we like to say we can't guarantee anything that happens, but I pretty much can guarantee something's going to happen there.
Yeah, yeah. Like what all of you what all of you witnessed there? Like ghosts, shadow people? Is that what like is? Let me ask you this: is that what you're gonna mostly get like on a paranormal investigation? It doesn't seem like demonic activity is very prevalent. It seems like more like spirits, and it seems like I don't know. I'm not an investigator myself, but from interviewing people, that's what it seems like. You know?
Yeah, for me, I've investigated places like Black Swan Inn, Old Park Hotel in Ballinger, Texas, and I've walked around some paranormal places around Texas, and I can say I've done over 100 investigations, and I've come across some dark feeling spirits, but the only reason why I say dark is because they're angry and they're not the normal, like, hey, we we got a story to share with you. It's more like they're defensive and wanting to control. And so I can say I have yet to come across a demonic spirit, but I'm not saying they're not out there. It's just I haven't crossed paths with any, and God willing, I will keep that trend going.
Yeah, yeah, that's so. When did this all start for you? You had started having paranormal experiences at the age of 2.
Right, I had my first paranormal experience at 2, and the funny thing about that is I keep getting pieces of the story. So, like, from when I first started telling the story till now, I've had people tell me little snippets of the story to where it's like, oh, so this isn't what was going on, it was this. And so I recently got a piece of the puzzle from my mom, was sharing with me because I thought I was in the attic. So I've always been telling it of being in the attic, falling down a vent shaft, well, finding out I was pulled into the vent shaft by accident by a spirit, and landing in the basement. And my mom said actually they were remodeling the second floor. So I wasn't in the attic, I was on the second floor and fell down the shaft, or was pulled into the shaft, I later found out. And so it's that's the fun thing about the paranormal investigating, like with personal experiences, even is as you get more information, the story changes and the picture becomes more clear. And it's like, okay, because I'm like, yeah, what 2 year old is in an attic?
Yeah, or even like by yourself at that age. You know what I mean? Like you, I mean, like you must have like been like a really like active kid, like as far as like like exploring and like you know what I mean, like and
Right.
just curious, like kids are, like you know, I mean, like but like was you did you kind of grow up in a haunted house?
So I haven't grown up in a haunted house, but my parents, before I was born, lived in a haunted house. And so paranormal has always been around my family. And so, like my parents lived in a haunted house for 6 months in Brockton, New York. And then later, when I was born, so the story of my experience at 2 that I now know about it is, so I was on the second floor and there was plywood supposed to be covering this vent access to the basement. Well, somebody apparently moved the cover, and there's people working, so stuff's bound to happen while you're remodeling. Well, I was looking over the edge and something grabbed my arms and I went into the shaft, landed on the concrete, and the only damage or only like harm that came to me was one of my eyebrows got nicked by a wire and the hair never grew in. So I have like a little reminder every day I look in the mirror of that experience. And I always remembered one spirit. And then I was talking with a medium friend, and she said there was actually a second spirit that came to take me away from the first one, who was the one that pulled me in. So I was saved by a second spirit.
Wow. Did you ever think about who that might have been? Do you think it could have been someone that like of your like a relative or something like that, or like a like maybe like a grandfather or a great grandfather that somebody might have been watching over you? Like maybe like here's what I'm thinking. Like maybe the house was severely haunted or something like that your parents lived in, and maybe there were good spirits there and bad spirits. Maybe the bad spirit that attacked you was like, it's just some evil spirit, but maybe the good spirit was like like a protector, like someone that you were related to. Did you ever think of that?
I did, and what the medium told me was it was a protector spirit. I don't personally know if it was family or not, but she has hence informed me that ever since that day when I was 2, that they are constantly watching over me, and that's why I have the like lucky streak of not really getting into harm's way a lot, because she said they're protecting me and they're not allowing any like harmful entities or anything to attach to me. I am like protected from all of that, and with that knowledge, I still won't go into certain places that I know like are like Amityville House. I probably would never step foot in there, knowing what's there, even though I know I'm protected, because I don't like to tempt fate.
Yeah, yeah. Then that makes sense, right? I mean, like, do you believe? Okay, so like, okay, like here's regarding the Amityville. Like, do you believe that that was the real deal? Because like, I know people got murdered there. That's like a given. But then like, a guy came on Art Bell, like, I think it was Bill Burns from UFO Hunters and someone else, and they tried debunking the case, but like it wasn't like it's like it's still up in the air, right? It's like 50-50 on whether that was like, as far as me, I don't know what other people think, but like what do you think? Do you think it could be the real deal, or what?
I think there's definitely something there, because the home. So the history of the Amityville house is it is not where it originally was built. they moved it to that location. So whatever wherever it was originally built, like say it could have been on Indian grounds. We don't know when it was originally built. Moved there. Well, those spirits that are angry are going to go with the house because now they're like, hey, this is you built this home on our home basically, so this is ours now. And so yeah, I get a feeling that there is something there. Whether it's demonic or not, I don't know, because without stepping in there, it's hard to say. But I would say, from the experiences that have been shared from those that were there and those who witnessed things, I would say, yeah, that's probably pretty close to, if not a demonic spirit there. But yeah, I don't know, so I can't speculate as to, I don't want to get quoted as saying there's a demon in Amityville, because there may not be, but there's definitely something dark that's not happy, and that happens with places, and
Yeah.
that can very well affect people.
That's what it seems like, right? It seems like that, like things like, did you ever hear the Deborah Moffat case? She was, it was an old Art Bell show too. Like, well, it was actually not that old. It was from 2015. It was like a story of a demon that was writing. It was like harassing her family, and it was writing on the mirror with a thing of soap. Like, she would leave the room. She would come back in. The demon would write on the mirror. It did crazy things, like it spiked her dog on a fence. Almost stabbed her mom, like with took knives and like would put them in weird places. That her husband woke up like in the middle of the night on a spear. This is so interesting. Her husband woke up and like he felt something underneath his back, and when he looked at what it was like a spear, and they had no idea where it came from. So then they found out that it was like an ancient spear that had come from the Congo, and the demon wanted her to like do a sacrifice with it or something. Like, it's a crazy story. Have you ever heard that story?
I I can't say that I have, but I do know some objects can do exactly that. That they are like vessel dolls or haunted objects that can carry the energy and spirits with it.
Yeah, I've heard of that too. I've heard of like haunted dolls too. Those are interesting. Like, I have a ex-girlfriend. She actually bought a haunted doll off of eBay, and she you know I don't know much about it, but like just very strange stuff. Like, do you believe that's like that? Do you believe that's right? Like, they're like haunted dolls, that those things are legit, or
There are, so there's haunted dolls and then there's vessel dolls. So vessel dolls are dolls that have a spirit inside of it. So they act differently. So like I know of a vessel doll at Fort Walters military base, and I did a investigation where I was talking with her, and I could tell she wasn't liking the questions I was asking, and I was like, "Are you trying to, you know, hurt my arm?" Because it was starting to get, like, the bone was starting to get tender, like, when you feel pressure on it. And so I was like, "Are you like not wanting me to be here? Are you like not happy I'm talking to you right now?" And I got the feeling yes. And as I walked away from her, the pain just dissipated and disappeared. And so I could tell, yeah, she did not want me there that night talking to her. And so, yeah, and I've been around haunted dolls to where, yeah, they move a little bit. They give off this creepy vibe. But yeah, the difference I think is the vessel dolls are the ones that have spirits actually in them, and will communicate. But I think haunted dolls just have a creepy essence to them.
That's interesting. That's really cool. Thank you for telling me. I mean, like, do you think they communicate like telepathically? Like, is that like they kind of like put implant in? Because that's kind of what it seemed like was happening with one of my ex girlfriends. It seemed like she was, conversing with this doll, and she would have conversations with it in her mind. Like, she would ask because the previous owner told her that like, this doll like being in the closet, right? So she would like move it around places. Like, I know it's hilarious, right? Like, she would move this doll from like different places in the closet. She'd put it in shoe boxes and shit like that. Like, I thought it was a little bit crazy at first. Like, I was like, "Are you really serious?" Like, you had, but then I've witnessed so much crazy stuff and heard, not crazy. I don't want to call it crazy because I don't think the paranormal is crazy, but like, we think it's crazy, but like, it's like the paranormal, I think, is becoming more normal, if that makes any sense.
Right. Well, because it's the unexplained, and we're starting to, as humans, as a race, we always had a thirst when we were growing up in the ancient days of trying to explain the unexplained. And I think we got to a point as a civilization where we thought we could explain everything, and then all of a suddenly things started happening, and they're like, wait a minute, this is not the normal, and hence we came up with the term paranormal. And what's interesting is people always, when you say, like, when I say I'm a paranormal investigator, they say, oh, you hunt spirits. I'm like, well, yeah, I try to communicate with spirits, but I'm also looking for UFOs, UAPs, or USOs, looking at, cryptids. I'm starting to get into that, inner dimensions. And so it's like, it's this really vast field, but everyone, when you start saying that, they're like, oh no, that's not paranormal, that's this. I'm like, well, by definition, that falls under paranormal. And when we break it down, they're like, yeah, you're right. Like, I was talking with a friend, and she was saying, angels are supernatural. I go, well, what's supernatural about it? She goes, well, they're not human. And I said, so they're paranormal. They're like a spirit. And she sat there for a second and goes, well, yeah, I guess you're right. They are paranormal. And I was like, supernatural is paranormal.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it's hard for some people to grasp that because they think, oh, no, no, because the paranormal only does this. It's like, no, it actually covers so much more.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to get into. I skipped ahead on your bio. I wanted to touch on this first, and I'll go back to some stuff. But like, you said you've had a couple UAP or UFO experiences. Could you get into that a little bit?
Sure. So what it was a lot of them were like, I would be driving, and then I would get the feeling of to look up, and there would be like this little dot in the sky. And at first I would think, well, maybe, my windshield's dirty and that's just a speck of dirt. And I would kind of let it go. And then, like 5 minutes later, I'm looking up, and the same spot is in the same place. And I'm like, wait a minute. I've moved from where I first saw it to where I've seen it now. I don't think this is a speck on my windshield, because it's not feeling like that. And so I would stop the car, get out and look up, and sure enough, it would be outside of the car. And I'm like, and then I would be like, okay. So I would sit there for a moment, and then I would get back in the car, and I'd start to drive, and then I would notice that the UFO, or unidentified object, would just slowly disappear behind the car. And I was like, okay, so you just wanted me to see you. I get it. Okay, that's cool. That's a cool experience. I never felt threatened by them. And one night I was at my parents' house and I felt the urge to go outside. And this was at night. And I looked over towards where my house was, and there was this one cloud that had yellow and red flashes on each side of it. And I mean, we know ball lightning or heat lightning, how it's you can tell that these look like impacts, like something was fired at something and hit a shield or something. And I was like, and they were random. It's like it wasn't like everything yellow was on one side, everything red was on another side. They were starting to blend. And my first thought was, this is a UFO battle. Nobody's going to believe I'm seeing this right now. And instead of getting my camera out to film it, I go, Mom, come check this out. And she came out and looked at it and she's like, what is that? And I said, I think that's a UFO battle. And we stood out there for like probably 5 minutes just watching this one cloud have these bursts. And there was no other clouds around, no other burst anywhere else, and there was no sound.
So do you think there's a lot more going on in space than what they're telling us?
Oh, I absolutely do.
Yeah, like secret space program stuff. Like,
I kind of feel like there's the secret space program has been going on for years, and there's so much that they're not telling us about it. And I like how some people tell us like shows like Stargate and Star Trek and Star Wars, all of those are actually telling us what's going on in space in such a way that we can understand it and see it and be like, okay, so we're not totally threatened by it. But at the same time, we're like, hey, I can't believe this is really happening out there.
yeah, it's great. I mean, like it seems like all the evidence points to the fact that there's a real secret space program. Like if you look at like the like all this stuff that happened in the 40s with the Nazis, and then like if you read like accounts like Colonel Corso, William Tompkins,
The Bell program,
what is that?
the Nazi Bell program, where they had.
Oh yeah, there was that too, and that landed like right outside of like. I mean, well, okay, I don't know if it did for sure, but like one of the guys that I interviewed, his name's Stan Gordon. He's older now, but he investigated the Kecksburg incident back in the 60s, or and yeah, I was thinking that maybe that Nazi Bell could have been the Kecksburg incident. I don't know.
It's possible.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I don't know. So what I want to go into some of the other stuff that you do. Like you said you had like you're a Reiki master, and then so you got into Reiki work. What drove you to that? Are you sensitive? Like are you like psychic and sensitive as well?
I am, but so what drove me to the Reiki was I just felt like I could help people, and it's like I could feel the energy around me, and I was just like, there's got to be a reason I can feel this energy and feel it, and feel like I can. I hate to say manipulate it, and I don't like using it, but kind of the better term I've been taught is be a conduit for it. And when I first did Reiki, it was like everybody was like, "Oh, you can feel the energy. You're really good with the energy, so you're a natural." So my first reaction was, "Well, then I guess I don't really have to take classes on this since I'm natural." And you get that little cocky mindset, when you're younger, going, "Well, I'm a natural. I don't have to learn this," and just kind of let it go to the wayside and didn't really pay much attention to it. And then when I got older, I had a new teacher who I told him my experience, and he said, try my course. And when he taught me Reiki, he also taught me how to read the body. Like one side of the body is masculine, one side's feminine, one side is the father's side, one side is the mother's. So if I was picking up an implant or an energy block, his first question always was, well, which side is it? So is this on the mother's side, the father's side? And it's like, oh, and it's like took a whole different like metaphysical approach to it. And I ended up getting my mastership with him, which so with Reiki, there's Reiki 1 and 2, which are different levels of using it. And when someone says I have Reiki Master, all that really means is they are licensed to teach someone Reiki. There's no like secret anything to it. It just means you're able to teach someone.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Like, and do you feel like the energy in your hands when you're doing like obviously, right? Like what do you do to generate that energy? Do you kind of get into like a psychic mode to try to feel and apply the energy to someone, and you know what I mean?
So what I end up doing was when I was working on people is it's gonna sound strange, but it's like I would visualize like them on an X-ray like hologram in front of me, and through the body were all these like I call them harmonic strings, and so I would look at them and be like, well, this one's really bright, this one's not as bright. Well, let me pluck that string, get some of that dirt and debris off, clean it up some, and then I would continue. And if there was a blockage, I'm like, wow, this string is really dark. What's going on here? And I could just feel the energy gravitating towards where it needed to go. And the reason I say that is like if I was working on someone's back, I may find myself standing more at their knees and ankles and being like, well, in my mind, I'm like, the issue's up there. Why am I down here? But every time I just let it do what it was going to do, they would constantly just say, wow, I can't believe how good that feels. That is so much relief. And I'm like, wow. And I had a case where a friend of mine's daughter had MS, and she was on my table, and her mother was like, she works for a chiropractor, nobody can help her, but her back is constantly in pain. And I put my hands over her ankles and just visualized like pulsing energy up those strings. And when it was done, I'd never done this before, but I've kind of put my hand down her back, asked her first if I could do that, and she said yeah. And it's like the spine felt straight. And the mother came over and did it, and she's like, "Oh my god, I can't believe how straight this is." And her daughter, when she stood up, she was like, "Oh my god, my back has never felt like this." And I was like, I don't know what I did, don't know how it happened. I don't know if it, maintained throughout or if it went back into the old, but I was like, in that moment, I just was like in awe of what just happened in a matter of 15 minutes.
That's amazing. Like that's fascinating that you were able to do that. Like that's really cool. Now, but what one thing that a couple other things that you studied Huna and timeline therapy. Can you talk? I think I've had someone come on my show about Huna before, but I can't remember exactly what exactly it is. Like I know
Huna
you got to
is
go to Hawaii to study that, right? Or no?
it is Hawaiian rituals and Hawaiian energy work is where it came from. And so there's different levels, and I don't remember which level I went up to, but I've studied it enough to where it's like I'm familiar enough to where if somebody was to come up and go, "Hey, can you do Huna on this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can do that," but I don't like sit there and say to somebody, "Okay, well, normally I would do this, but let's do this." I just blend them together, and so the Huna becomes part of the Reiki, becomes part of everything, and so the timeline therapy that you brought up was a technique where I learned you put someone in a trance state and say they have a pattern of always getting to say every 5 years they quit their job and they don't know why. They just get unhappy and move on, to something else. And they're constantly doing that. So in timeline therapy, what I would do is put that person in a trance state and go back to the first time they ever had a job that they were happy at, and then look at it and then find out, well, at 5 years, something happened where they were working and it became miserable and unbearable. And so they just had to leave. Well, that set into a pattern of every 5 years they expected their work to get miserable, unbearable, and they'd have to leave. And so what we do is we change how you saw it and say, well, maybe it wasn't so unbearable. Maybe, did you think that you left that job and you had a better job after that? And they were like, well, yeah, I did for a while. I was like, so let's focus on that. So you start to take the positives and bring those into the future, plant them in. And really, what you're doing is rewriting your personal script of patterning. So instead of in 5 years going, I have to quit, this is going to suck, is, hey, maybe it's time to look for something better. And you have a more positive outlook on it. And so, really, what we're doing is just rewriting from always seeing the negative in something to looking at it in a more positive way and bringing the positive and rewriting it and seeing how it changes your life.
I like that. That's really cool. That's really cool. Now a couple you do a lot of stuff. Like you have a lot of there. I could probably talk to you forever. Like, and the couple other things that you're really into that I'm into are tarot cards and palm reading. How did you learn that? Like, I mean, I have a deck of tarot cards, but I never learned them really. Like, I never took the time to, you know, I don't know. Like, but how did you get into that?
So that actually is a funny story because the lady that was teaching me Huna was also the one who taught me timeline, and she could tell I could gravitate with this energy work and had a knack for it. And so they were constantly throwing at me like concepts, like, and I took a course on palm reading, and I could read the lines and understand the lines on a base level. And but I was like, I really don't want to sit there and be reading people's hands all the time. I was more interested in reading my own hand. And so I was learning all these things and not really, thinking, are these, things that'll benefit me. It was just things that they were telling me I needed to learn. And then I finally one day was like, I'm not learning anything for me. I'm learning this for them. And so I stopped taking the courses. And but the tarot, I was originally taught like each card had a specific and everything. And then I had a friend teach me later that you look at the card and you feel, what is the card showing you? What is the card saying? And then another friend would be like, yeah, look at the story. They're telling you a story. So tarot cards are really story cards. And so when you put like the past, present, and future in front of you, you can see like, okay, so hardships are, here, you're going to overcome them, and you have this bright future, and it lays out what needs to happen, and it's just a matter of interpreting it. And one of the things that was hard for me is it's not interpreting in the sense of, so in 2 weeks this is going to happen, and then you're going to find this in a week, you're going to learn this, and then you got everything you wanted. There's no time to it, so it's like you're constantly going, well, in your future this is going to happen after this happens. And it's like, and I felt kind of bad because I hated leaving people in my thought of not really with a clear answer like I would want. But I mean, that was my own personal bias. I never had anyone tell me I was wrong or that was incorrect or worthless. They're all like, yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I'll keep an eye out for it. And I was just like, okay. But yeah, and one of the things too that I was taught is there's hidden symbols in the decks, and by a friend. Like when you see 10 of swords, we're thinking, oh my gosh, there's 10 swords there. You're going to be fighting something or you're going to be defending something. Well, he goes, well, what happens if you move the S to the end? You got 10 of words. Words are a lot different than swords. And so it's like my mind was just like, whoa, I never thought to look at the card that way.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. It really is interesting. Like, it seems like there's like definitely magic in a tarot deck because, like it seems like no matter like if I do like I don't really know the definitions of the cards, but like for example, like if I get like pull out my Rider Waite deck right now and I draw a couple cards for myself, I guarantee you it'll be something that's like related to my life. Like, so do you think that there is actually magic in the cards, or do you think it just happens to be circumstance? Like, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think there definitely is magic in the cards. And I mean, I have always I myself have about probably 10 or 12 tarot and oracle cards decks. And I will feel like if say I want to know something about an event, in business, I will feel gravitated towards a certain deck. And when I do the reading, it'll make sense to myself. Even though we're always told when you learn like tarot and everything, they'll say don't read yourself. I always do. I read for myself. I do energy work on myself, and sometimes I'm more critical than I need to be, but that's just a personal flaw of mine. I'm always harder on myself, but I find comfort in knowing that. So to me, what it is the magic is we have the answers inside ourselves as to what we need to do and how to do it, but we get some comfort from it feeling like another source is telling us this answer. And I feel like really what's going on is the cards are just telling us what our subconscious is trying to tell us in a way that we're like, oh, hey, somebody else is saying this, so it's got to be true. This has got to be real. And in fact, it's us just telling ourselves, yeah, this is what you need to do. You already knew it inside. It's just like a confirmation or validation of what you thought was the right thing. That's the magic I think of what's in the cards.
Yeah, that's cool. But the last thing I wanted to touch on that we didn't get into yet was you said you had three near death experiences. What happened with that? That's like, and then did that like kind of prove your like prove to you existence of the afterlife, or was it more like your paranormal experiences that kind of did that? Like,
So, what would happen with my near death experiences is so I grew up, I like maybe probably 5 times have had a serious cold or a flu. I literally rarely got sick. I'm like, and so when I would start to feel sick, it would always pass in like 12 hours or, a day or two. It's like I never really got very sick. And so when I had my first near death, I was walking into my room and all of a sudden I felt like ice cold, like somebody just put me in a freezer, and I got dizzy and woke up and my chin hurt, and I realized I hit my chin on a wooden bedpost. And I'm like, whatever I was thinking about before that happened, it's like I had no idea what it was, no idea how much time had passed. I felt dizzy, and then when I came to and realized, okay, all of a sudden I was like, I was feeling totally fine. I wasn't feeling sick anymore. My body was back to normal temperature. And I would all of a sudden, like a few days later, start to have a sense of something. And it's like, I started thinking maybe these experiences were bringing some of my awareness of gifts to me. And that's how I was downloading them, is kind of like a restart of the body, going, okay, you're now able to do this, and this is going to be a part of your normalcy. And so it's like, okay, and or if something was on my mind, I feel like when I came back, I had clarity of what it was, how I needed to do it, when I needed to do it, and everything would always work out just as I had thought. So, yeah, I mean, I I'm not one that I ever would go to the hospital, because I'm like, I don't like how if I have a headache, they're like, well, let's probe you here or there. I'm like, that has nothing to do with my headache. I feel like you're on a witch hunt for something. I always will use that term when I think about doctors, is I feel like they're on witch hunts, and I'm like, I don't want to partake in a witch hunt.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, oh, I mean, you got a chance to. I didn't want to forget about this too. You got a chance to travel over the world. You took a transatlantic cruise. You were in Spain. It looks like you were in the southern Qatar, France region, and then you went to Egypt for your birthday as well. Like, and you had some experiences there.
I So I've actually traveled to a lot of places, but yeah, those were three of them that where I had really big experiences. And actually, on the transatlantic, I kind of let one experience overshadow another one, and that was being in Rome and walking around. And every time I would see like where the ruins of something was, and like the Circus Maximus is just a field now. I felt so much anger in me over that, going, what the hell is wrong with these people? This was our history. This is where we, had our games. This was our entertainment. This was our civilization. This was a main thing for us. And for them to just dismantle it, I was like, what the hell? And it's like I could feel his anger in me and sadness. And I found myself, I would have to sit back and go, okay, I'm having a past life reaction to this. And yes, it's gone, and yes, it's sad, but I cannot let this anger and sadness overrun me and stop me from seeing the beauty of what's around. And I would constantly be doing that at locations of ruins and going, oh my God, this is what we fought for, and this is how they treated it. And it's like strange to hear yourself think like that because you're like, was born in America. As far as I knew, I had no ties to, the Roman Empire whatsoever. But I did find out genealogically I did have ties to the Roman Empire. And so it was interesting how a friend of mine and I, her name's Kathleen Tierney Cogliano, we view now when we go to places, we do soul retrieval, where we pick up pieces of our soul from our past and reintegrate it and learn from it and integrate all the experiences it's had, waiting for us to return to pick it back up.
That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I've heard what was the word I'm looking for? I've heard that like soul retrieval is good like for like I mean like this again, I'll go back to my ex-girlfriend for this. Like, she told me that she had soul retrieval done and it changed her life. Like I mean, like, what are your thoughts on soul retrieval? And like, do you think it can really like change people's lives who've had like troubled pasts or whatever?
I would definitely say from my experience, and I think Kathy would say the same, is it 100% changed us.
Yeah.
So Kathy and I met each other in Egypt, and so in Egypt we were visiting temples and going up the Nile, and so every time we would visit certain temples, we would have certain experiences, and the coup de grace of the trip was on my birthday. We've got to go into the Great Pyramid. And so we went. My memory is of going into the King's Chamber, getting into a black sarcophagus that was bigger than the opening carved out. Cannot explain how it got into this chamber, but the lid was missing. But my friend tapped a tuning fork on two corners to send us out of body and bring us back into body. And everyone had their own personal out of body experience. Mine, I got to see the Egyptian gods and meet them. And then my memory is we then started to leave the pyramid, and she was telling me we went into the queen's chamber, and she had an experience there while some went back up to the king's chamber and did some harmonics. And they recorded the harmonics to find out it was something called the music of the spheres, which has got to do with the planetary alignment. And she knows more about it than I do, but I had just started hearing about this when she told me of her experience with this Thursday. And it was like, wow, it's like, how did I not remember all of this? And what we came up with was we were probably in soul retrieval mode, processing, and just it takes you out. But both of us were like, man, it was completely different being there. And I can remember with Reiki, I was like every night doing Reiki on my friends that were in the tours from all the walking and everything, and just feeling like this energy is not my energy. I've never felt energy like this. It felt more sacred. And she and I both were talking about when we were walking the temples, it's like our minds were in the mindset of I am stepping foot where Pharaoh stepped, where priests, priestesses, people thousands of years have stepped, and I'm seeing exactly what they saw. It has not changed. And it's like literally walking through history. And I started thinking, God, like 50 years from now, someone's going to be walking along and seeing what I've seen. And the beauty of Egypt is, so say I take a picture of Luxor from a certain angle. 50 years from now, someone's going to be able to take that photo, walk up to Luxor, look at it, and go, this is where Michael stood 50 years ago taking this photo. Because they don't change it. It's just left in its magnificence and historic value, and it's like it's just awe-inspiring. You can't not be changed by that.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Like, so, yeah, have you been to like pyramids all over the like? Have you went all over the world, or like, what? How many different places would you say you traveled to throughout your life?
The easiest thing would be is to say I've traveled to the European continent, the African continent, and the North American continent, and I've been to South America or Central America. I haven't actually stepped foot in South America or Australia or the Antarctic yet, or Asia.
Oh, that's cool. But you've even yeah, that's really cool. I'm seeing if there's any other stuff that I wanted to cover. I think that's everything. Did you? Well, okay. Here, I was going to say this. Do you want to finish up? Do you want to tell everybody where they can find you and the best if you want to be contacted, how to contact you for paranormal
Sure.
investigation?
So you can find me on Facebook under, I think it's Michael Koff. You'll see my pictures there. On YouTube, I have a YouTube channel, Michael Koff. That's my paranormal journey. I post investigation stuff there sometimes, or I post my podcast shows. You can see me on Tuesday nights at 9 o'clock on the energy that surrounds us. That's Central Time. And Thursday, every other Thursday afternoon at 1:30 Central Time on Paranormal Versus. And the fun thing about Paranormal Versus is the host is Kel Ridley, and she lives in the UK. And so we'll interview people and we get the flavor of UK versus the US. And sometimes we actually get to compare like how we do things in the US versus how things are done in the UK. And we sometimes compete on who's more historic and has more paranormal hauntings from history, because you would think Europe would beat us, but when we start getting to Native American sites, it's like we can actually outdate Europe if we think about it. And it's just challenges us and makes us look at, what we're doing. And the main goal of my paranormal investigating, my podcast shows, is a phrase called para-unity. And what it is bringing unity to the paranormal community. Teams that normally wouldn't investigate together, bringing them together and learning from each other, because no one has all the answers. There are no experts in the paranormal field. And so we can learn from each other. We may not always agree with each other, but there's respect there. And that's what I try to promote. And I mean, as a paranormal podcast host, I'm sure you come across a guest, you're like, I don't know what this person's thinking this, why he's thinking this, or what's going on here. But you still give them their space and give them their time and let them share it. And because, everyone deserves respect. And yeah, you may not always agree, but you'll still learn something. And that's the key.
I agree. I think that's really well said. I wish more people were like you, honestly. I really do. Because, like, there's a lot of, especially like in the UFO community, like, there's a lot of bickering that goes on. I've noticed, like, between different people, and they get at each other's throats over like who thinks right and who has evidence. And it's like, oh, really? We're doing this? Like, it's like, are we in high school? You know what I mean? It's like, I don't I try to be like, I try to have like that Art Bell mentality, and I try to have like guests of all different, like walks of life. And I'll have, I'm sure you do this too. Like, one day I'll have someone on about the secret space program, the next day I'll be talking about shadow people, the next day I could be talking about a JFK conspiracy, the next day I'm talking about ghosts. You know what I mean? Like, I try to,
Right.
you know switch it up, so it's like, or I'll talk about near death experiences or astral travel, or like, I mean, like, that's why I like talking to you, because like you kind of cover a lot of stuff that I cover on my show. So this was really fun.
Right. And the thing I like about having the two different shows is the energy that surrounds us is kind of a revamp of a show I originally had. And it's more of locals or paranormal teams or locations. And we just tried doing episodes on how to investigate locations and what did we get, did it work or not work. And paranormal versus is more of like you're saying, where I've had secret space program people on, I've had paranormal investigators on, we've done equipment people who build equipment. And so it's like, yeah, I like to broaden it and bring in guests that'll challenge the viewers as well as me. And it's also a chance to share stuff that I'm interested in and want to learn more about. And I totally would take the stance of, I know as being a podcaster, we depend on viewers, but my stance is if you don't like the topic that's on, don't watch it that week. You're not going to hurt my feelings by not watching, like Secret Space Program. If that's not your bag, don't watch the episode about it. Watch the other episodes.
It's
You're not.
weird because like people, I've noticed, like, and I feel like I get triggered too, and I try not to, like, I think, like, I've been trying to quit smoking cigarettes lately. I that was something stupid I should have never done. Like, I vape, right? And then I started like smoking again. And like today I tried quitting, and I was like, I'm not going to smoke one cigarette. Like, I've been through a breakup. So, it's really like it affected me hard. For like the last 5 months, I've been kind of like, and then like family issues too. So like, like I think I get triggered. I guess where I was trying to go with that, sorry, I didn't mean to tell you my life story, is like, I think we all get triggered, but you're right. Like, all we can do is like, we can just, instead of like letting ourselves get triggered, we probably just all need to take a breather and just go to the next thing, right? Like, don't watch it if it triggers you. Is that really what you mean?
Well, yes, and also like if you're not a believer and you don't want to know anything about it, don't feel like you have to watch something because it's you're a quote fan or something. Just watch what you want to watch, and our shows will be there irregardless. I mean, and I think that's why people gravitate somewhat towards my shows is it's authentically topics that I'm interested in. And somebody said to me one time, they're like, why don't you ask the viewers what they want you to have on your show? And I was like, because then it's not going to be my show. If I start like pulling the audience and they all want this, and I'm like, but I really want to talk about that, I'm not going to be happy in the show, and therefore the show's not going to succeed because we have to be happy ourselves and want to do it and have the drive to do it. And so that's where I'm like, yeah, I know we need the viewers, and the viewers are important. And don't get me wrong, I love our fans and everyone who views our shows. But my personal stance on the podcasting is I do shows I want to do. And people just gravitate towards it because they see my passion and my love of the topic and interest in it, and they can learn from it, or they can say, well, I'm not a UFO guy, so I'll skip this one and I'll stay tuned for next week's and see what that is. And I'm totally fine with that. I don't and I don't mind, like, if I have 120 views on one episode and 7 views on the other episode. I'll still have the 7 views person on the show again if they want to come on. It's like I don't look at it and go, well, the people didn't like you, I'm sorry. It just wasn't a good episode, so I can't have you back on because the people really like this style person and this topic. And I'm like, you can't run a show that way. It's contrary to what you would think would make a podcast successful because, yeah, the second you give up control of the show, it's not your show.
That's a really good point. I never thought about that. I never really thought. But I mean, like, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. Do you do audio? Here, I'm going to quit recording. So, guys, like I want to ask you a couple questions real quick. Guys, thank you for tuning in, and I'll have all Michael's links in the description. And and thank you everybody. But I was